Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is October 12th. Wow, October 12th, 2016. This is Wednesday night, so we're studying Old Testament. We have our live Bible study class, and as I said, on Wednesdays, we're studying the Old Testament. It so happens that we are in the book of Genesis, and we're in chapter 11. I was telling you last week that the first 11 chapters of Genesis take up almost 1/3 of the time from the Garden of Eden till the present time, almost 2,000 years. And we're over 600, 4,000 in the Old Testament and 2,000 since then. We were talking about the flood. Last week, we talked about the offspring of Noah and where they settled and what countries they went to. I don't think there's any need, even though we have a lot of information on it and a lot of names I could read and a lot of countries I could read, but I don't see any benefit in spending any more time on that. But we are going into the 11th chapter now. We don't have very many verses on what we're going to talk about tonight. But when we get through with what we're going to talk about tonight, we go into a whole new area of Bible study. We go into the patriarchs, which are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Another name for Jacob is Israel. So until we get to Moses, and that doesn't happen until in the book of Exodus, we have a whole big area of Bible study. Remember now, I think I sent you a map. On the map that I think I sent you, sometimes when I'm sending it in the mailings, they're not this. I don't get the same information as when I'm putting it on Facebook or something. And I was looking because it was 352 years. I wanted you to know how much time went by before the incidents of the flood. Because this thing with Noah that we did last week, this was like a year or so after the flood. Got out of the ark, planted a vineyard, got drunk. So this is a year or two. I wanted you to see how much time passed between the time they came out of the ark and the incident of the Tower of Babel happened. And it was 272 years. It started in 6005 BC and it went to, no, back up, 2319, and it went to 1967. Now, to give you an idea of how long the 352 years is in history, the Babylonian world empire lasted 272 years. The Persian, 206. The Greece, 270. Now, when we get to the Roman Empire, it lasted longer, over 500 years. But those first three are in the 200s. And the period of time between the flood and the Tower of Babel, I know it's one right after the other in the Bible, but the period of time, that's what I spent a great deal of time yesterday and today looking up, was 352 years. So that much population had gone on. So we had considerable people. Not anything like what we have now, But we're not just talking about a few families or a few countries. I'm reading from the Holman Standard Bible. At one time, the whole earth had the same language and vocabulary. Of course they did. They all came from one family, Noah's family, his 3 sons. You teach your children your language. I don't know if you have ever noticed it, but when people move from one country to another, they take with them their customs, but more than that, they take with them their language and their religion, their faith. I have, since 1953, been involved in the Spanish-speaking branch of my denomination. At one time, we were all over the country. And now just California has 3 or 4 districts. At that time, I forgot where I was going with it. But we have a large group of people here. They're all from one family. Most of our churches now have services in English or Spanish, or the services translated. Now, they all live in the United States. Why don't they just all speak English? Well, first of all, some of them are older, some of them aren't interested, some of them aren't good at languages, and some do speak English. But does it mean you have to give up one language just because you have 2 or 3 or 4 other languages? You also take with you your customs, the kind of food you like. Oh, you adapt. I don't know anybody that doesn't like McDonald's. I don't care what country their origin is. So customs are big, but your faith and your language is something you keep. So that's true today. This was true then. At one time, after 352 years off the ark, the whole earth spoke the same language and vocabulary. I want to check the other version. I want to see what it says instead of vocabulary. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. As people migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar. Shinar, I can't remember exactly which of 2 or 3 maps I sent you, but of those that I sent you, it's in Babylon. Babylon, of course, is now called Iraq. Some of the maps said Shinar on them because they were maps from ancient times and the ancient names of cities are on them. But if you can't find them, you go to the area in Iraq that's between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And that's about where Shinar is. I'm not sure exactly how many miles. I should have tried to figure that out too. So people went there and decided they'd settle there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make oven-fired bricks." They had brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. So they didn't use cement, they didn't use stone. And they said to each other, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Now, since I was a little girl, I've heard preachers say that they were trying to get to heaven without God. Number one, it doesn't say that there. Number two, it doesn't give us any reason to think that that's what it means. I don't even think they thought of heaven. This was before Jesus telling his disciples about heaven. Before that, we had the prophets. Before the prophets, we had Moses and the law. And this is before that. There was no teaching. Now, not everything that they did is in these 11 chapters. But we have no reason to think that they were thinking, oh, there must be a heaven somewhere, and how do I get up there? Oh, let's build something so high that we can just walk up. That doesn't even make sense. I think they had a different reason. They said, come, let us make fired bricks. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top to the sky. This is what I think was the true reasoning. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let's be something and somebody important. Or we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth. If we stick together and make up our mind to do something, we can do something big and we can be important. But if we just go off here and there and a family goes there and so we'll never amount to anything. Let's stick together and do something our way, or we'll be scattered over the face of the earth. Then the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the men were building. And the Lord said, if, as one people, all having the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. If they've got together and they've come up with this plan, then they're capable of doing anything. They've gotten together, they're of one mind, they've reasoned it out. So he said, come, let us go down and confuse them. First of all, who's God talking to? He says, come, let us go down and confuse their language. Who was God talking to in the Garden of Eden and said, let us make man in our image? Who is we? Who is part of our? Of course, there's the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We get to that Sunday night. I thought we would last Sunday, but we didn't, but we will this time. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other's speech. See, they got together and made plans. For that, you've got to be able to communicate. Now, if half of them had one language and half of them had another language, they could still do some communication, and I think some of them would have learned a language real fast, but I believe probably everybody had a different language. And if you ever wondered, because they're all Noah's family, he had 3 sons. Obviously, they started out with one language, but with everybody speaking a different language, or every family speaking a different language. So the Lord scattered them from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Well, obviously, they could do nothing that took understanding and agreement among them. Therefore, the name is called Babylon. Well, actually, I believe another version calls it something else. That's in, let me see what verse. Yeah, King James says, therefore is the name of it called Babel. And I was going to tell you that Babel was the same as Babylon, but I don't have to because I started out reading in a different version that calls it by that name. The word Babel comes from Babylon. The first country that is a world government is Babylon. There were two before that, but talking about Daniel and King Nebuchadnezzar's image. And it is now Iraq. And you may wonder when you're reading the book of Revelation or talking about prophecy, why they're talking about Babylon and why Babylon is part of the things that happen in the last days. It's Iraq. For the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. I'm going to go quickly over a few verses. Now I want to talk about world government because I believe just something that occurred to me. You know what that means. I could say the Lord told me, and some people wouldn't understand it. But it occurred to me. This is what they wanted to do. They wanted to be in one place and rule it and started out. Anything that came from that would be beneath them, would be under them. They would be ruling it. And by confusing their language, they were unable to do that, so they scattered. There was no reason to stay together anymore because their purpose for staying together was interfered with. They had plans. And obviously, their plans did not include God. I don't think they were trying to get to heaven, golden streets, and all of that. I don't think they knew anything about it. But they had a plan. And it didn't include God. And we're going to see all these other one world government. And where it has gone in the past, where it's going in the future. And it doesn't include God as far as they're concerned. What they don't realize is that God has a plan. And regardless of whether they know about it, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, doesn't really make any difference. God has a plan. Let me tell you where we go for the rest of this chapter, because I want to have an ending where we take up next week. That took us to verse 9. In verse 10, it goes again over the family records of Shem. And then we just get a list of names and their ages and their kids. And then in verse 25, well, before that, we just have the family of Shem. Till we get to verse 23. Now there's only 32 verses. In verse 23, we have a man by the name of Nahor. He had sons, one of whom was named Terah. He had another by the name of Abram and another by the name of Haran. So we have Terah, Nahor, Abram, Haran. 3 brothers. He had at least one daughter named Sarai. There was no problem in those days with, and it wasn't considered incest, to marry a relative. And Sarai and Abram married each other. They had different mothers. And as I've told you many times, unless some woman did something outstanding or was very well known, we don't even get her name. So we don't know the name of one of the mothers. But both of them had the same father. Now, of those 3 boys, one of them had a son whose name was Lot. And you've heard Bible stories. And as we get farther in the book of Genesis, we'll read of Abraham and his nephew Lot. That's the family we're talking about. Nahor had 3 sons. One of his sons was Abram. One of his sons had a son whose name was Lot. And so Abram, one of his brothers, and one of his nephews, we hear and read about a lot. Okay. Abram and Nahor took wives. Abram's wife was named Sarai, and Nahor's wife was named Milcah. Milcah is also the name of Moses' mother, but this is not the same person. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Ishka. Sarai was barren and had no child. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his son Abram's wife, and they set out together from Ur. Ur is very close to where the Garden of Eden was. It's also just a little north of the Persian Gulf, and it's between the Euphrates River and the Tigris River, and there's 2 other rivers. And it's when you find where those 4 rivers, now I have only been able to identify 3, but when you get where those 3 rivers are together, that's where the Garden of Eden was. Now, Ur, of course, they just left the Garden of Eden, didn't travel all that far. They were walking, of course, so they weren't going to go too far. And they got out together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. Canaan is where Israel is now. That's what it was originally called, was Canaan. There are a lot of old-fashioned songs that speak of the land of Canaan. In other words, the land we're going to, the land God's promised us. But when they got to Haran, a little bit more than halfway, I would say, they settled at Haran. Terah lived 205 years. and he died inherent. Now that ends chapter 11. So I'm going to talk about some other things right now, but that ends our scripture for tonight. I want to talk about, let me bring this a little bit closer to me. I want to talk about one world government because it's nothing new. The Babylonian government is the first one listed in 6 places, 6 things that are mentioned. Remember, we have the head of gold, that was Babylon. We had the chest and arms, that's Medes and Persians. Then we had the stomach was brass. That's Greece. How do I know it's Greece? No, because now it's history. All that time has gone by. We look back to see what has already happened. So of the 6 that are mentioned, the first 4 have already happened. So we look back and we know. Babylon, which is Iraq. Medes and Persians. The Medes were down southwest, but the Persians were the main country, and that is Iran. Iran and Iraq are neighbors. After Iran, Persia, were the Greeks. That's history. And then Rome. Rome was the most military, most interested in that type of thing, and it was the longest. The Roman Empire came into power. Now, all this time, 1,287 years. 1,287 years. One of those 4 countries was ruling the world. Wow. Yeah. During that time, Jesus was born. But see, God manages to have his way, even when he has to move on people to do something different. Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem because he was from the lineage of David, and that was the city of David. You know what God had to do to get Jesus born in Bethlehem? God had to put it in the mind of Caesar, the head of the whole thing. He wanted to know how many people he had and where they were from. So he had a decree. Everybody's got to go to the home of your relatives. Well, since Mary and Joseph were both of the lineage of David, but since he was the male, they went to Bethlehem. All of that God had to do in order to fulfill prophecy so that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. God has a plan. A lot of people don't even know they're part of God's plan. They show up in our lives to bless us, and they don't know it, and we don't know it, that God put him there for that purpose. The Babylonian Empire was 272 years. I figured it out this afternoon. Persia was 206. Greece was 270. The Roman Empire started 63 years before the birth of Christ. So that when Christ was born, the Roman government was not only in power, but was a world power. Only they had the power to put somebody to death. That's why the Sanhedrin and Jewish leaders had to make up lies about Jesus, because nothing they accused him of was anything that they could punish him for. They wanted him gone. But the Roman government didn't give them that kind of power. You know, the big ones on top, they'll give a little power here. Yes, you can do that. Yes, you can do that. But don't forget, I'm running things. And that's how world power is. So Greece was 270. The Roman government lasted 539 years, but it started 63 years before Christ. Then when Christ entered this ministry at age 30, they would have been in power for 93 plus 1, 94 years by the time Jesus started his ministry. 97 and a half by the time he was crucified. But at that time, and that was in the year 476 after Christ, they were in power for a total of 539 years. Right up until 476, subtract from 2016, the year we're in now. And then we have no world government. We have no world government now. There are two countries that consider themselves ruled by their God, Allah. There are a couple of dictatorships. There are some monarchies, small. The monarchy of Great Britain doesn't have a lot of power, but a lot of history and a lot of pride and a lot of love and appreciation. The monarchy certainly does not rule the country, but plays a big part. And much of the world, at least our part of it, is a representative type government. I elect you, you represent me. That's important. I vote for you. You become a congressman. You become a senator. You become president. I made you who you are, but you represent me. The idea is, I vote for you and you work for me. Well, when did you last have lunch with your senator? When did your president? Oh, they're out working awfully hard for votes now. They've been at it for a year and a half, nonstop, just to get your vote. Now, I know you're hoping that after you elect them, they're going to remember that you voted for them. But don't put any money on it. We've had that kind, we have in the United States and many other countries, that type of representative government. It's supposed to represent us, but lately it has even been going, some have even gone beyond their constitutional power and done things that the Constitution does not authorize them or give them the power to do. So what it amounts to is that it's not a representative type government, is it? We always think that if we go a little bit higher, we'll get our needs taken care of a little bit better. Maybe, but you know what? The higher you go, the less power you have. I had somebody contact me when they found out that I was teaching in a certain school district and that I was a preacher. And their kid had had some books in a class. They were in special education. They were gifted, brilliant children. And these books were not according to our faith. And the man happened to be an attorney, successful one. He said, you tell me what to do. You can use my offices, my equipment, my people, whatever. And this old preacher, who was friends with many school district personnel, went to talk to them about taking these books out of the district. So I wouldn't have been able to do this as a teacher, but I had just moved within the district a few months ago, and some of the district officials didn't know I'd moved. So when I told them I was speaking as a member of the community that had owned property and paid taxes to that school district, they listened to me. And of course, we won. Now, if you don't get something local, you go beyond that to your elected representative a little higher up. One time I went to a congressman. I won't even give you the details on that because that'd take me another 5 or 10 minutes. But my congressman went to bat for me with an airline. But if you can't get what you need in California, we are in the United States of America. We've got Washington, D.C. But the farther you get away from home, the less you're listened to and the less important you are. The closer home, in a neighborhood meeting, you have authority, you can talk. If you live in an area that's a community, and a lot of houses are, or you live in a big apartment, your voice means something. You can say, well, I don't think we should leave the front door open after 11 o'clock or something like that, and you have your say and people listen to you. But if we're talking the state of California, or the state of Oregon, or the state of Kansas, I don't think they care when you close your doors. And if you think your senator cares, I mean, really, he doesn't even know who you are. When you are close to home in a small community, what you want is important and people listen to you. The farther away from home you go, and this is important, the farther away from home you go, they don't have a clue who you are and they could care less, except now that we're voting. Please vote for certain ones now because they want your vote. I wrote a sample for people that live in California. We had a thing here with Christian colleges. We had a law that looked like it was going to be passed. And I wanted to tell people how they should approach their representative. And so I wrote a little letter. There came a time when you asked for my vote. Now I'm asking for yours. And I had written to an assemblyman. And because I wrote such a great letter, I guess I got a phone call a few minutes after I sent the email from the Assemblyman's office. That's here in Southern California. Now, I go to Arizona. They don't have a clue who I am. They don't even care. And in Washington, D.C., they don't even see me. I could be dying on the doorstep needing something and nobody. But people get the idea, oh, if we could just all get together, we could really, really, really do something big. Well, we had a League of Nations, and it wasn't doing much. And it became the United Nations. The United Nations started, well, it was in about 1941. It was just before the Second World War ended that this business started. It was about 1945 when it came into being. And the headquarters are in New York. Now, this is a world outfit. If I have no power in the state of California, and I have no power, nobody cares about me in the United States of America, what chance do I have in the United Nations? Well, the United Nations, they have adopted a plan for 2030. Every crazy thing that I've heard of is part of that plan. And already, I was just reading on the internet while I was waiting for time to go by, time for my program to start, about the lesbian, gay, bi, transgender community is already talking to the United Nations. And what are your plans for us? Well, I haven't asked them what their plans are for me. I haven't asked them, what are your plans for old ladies who are born again and spirit-filled? But already people know they're going to be ruling the world. Now, how do I know they're going to be? How do I know the United Nations is the New World Order that everybody's talking about? Well, we've got some history. We got Babylon, Persia, Greece, Roman Empire. Of 6 things that we were shown, 4 of them have come to pass. Exactly. What haven't we, hasn't come, what is it that we've seen hint of, but it hasn't happened yet? One has something to do with the old Roman government, and we call it the Reformed Roman Empire. On the statue, it was 2 legs. How would 2 legs, rather than 1 stomach, 1 chest, 1 head, how would that represent Rome? Well, remember that at the time of the Roman Empire, it covered more land than any of the previous empires because there were more people. And there were divisions because of their cultural differences. The first 2 were in the Mideast. Iran and Iraq. The next 2 were in Europe, Greece and Rome, Italy. So it's easy to understand the two legs, but the two legs had 2 feet. And where the legs were just represented by iron, the feet were represented by iron and clay. If I went out and I built something, I shaped something, I made a statue, and it's made out of iron and clay, how long do you think that thing's going to last? First of all, you push it over and it falls over, that clay's not going to last. So we know that that part is very short-lived. And then the other one is not part of the statue, but a stone not made from hands comes rolling off a mountain, hits the statue in the feet, knocks it over, and that's the end of the statue. The first 4 are history. We've seen them. In fact, it's been 1,373 years since the Roman Empire went out. But we do know a little bit about the future from prophecy. Now, all we've got to figure out, what we see happening today and what we have in prophecy, are there similarities? You bet there are. First of all, it's going to be short-lived or short-lived, however you say it. After the rapture, the Antichrist will not immediately take over. It's going to be, he's going to be an important person. But the day after the rapture, he's not going to be running the world. As a matter of fact, he's going to make a deal with Israel. Making a deal with somebody is not ruling over them. If you're ruling, you just tell them. But very quickly, he is on the rise and has considerable power during the first 3.5 years. But in the middle of that 3.5 years is when he comes to all of his power and then really rules. But it's short-lived. I told you that Babylon lasted 272 years. Persia, 206. Greece, 270. Roman Empire was 539 years. This is going to be 7. Why? Because clay and iron don't mix. Now, what do we know about prophecy? Prophecy says when Jesus' feet touched the Mount of Olives and it splits into 2, and the city of Jerusalem into 3, Jesus is going to rule. For how long? We know he's going to rule for 1,000 years. And he's going to rule the whole earth. Antichrist is going to rule the whole earth. So the things that we're talking about in prophecy study on Sunday morning complete what we studied in the Old Testament about the prophetic dream that Nebuchadnezzar had that Daniel interpreted. So what we need to see is what we're seeing in the world, is that what's leading up to this? Or are we in the same place as I was when I was born 85 years ago? Am I any closer? Yeah, we're a whole lot closer. They were one world authorities. Now, we know that in the first one coming up, the 7-year one, we're going to have a false religion. We're told to be careful of false prophets. What's the difference between a false prophet and a liar? A false prophet is teaching the wrong religion. And a liar is just lying about everything. The United Nations has accepted that they are the New World Order. George Bush, the first one, George Walker Bush, 41, I guess they call him, had mentioned it. I don't believe he knew what he was talking about. I think basically he was a good man. I don't think he would have been with Reagan if he wasn't. But I don't think he understood. And many people think a new world order would be wonderful. Oh, we get rid of this bad thing. We get rid of that bad thing. You know what some of the bad things are that they want to fix? Global warming is one of them. Cities that aren't safe is another. Do we really need a world organization to stop the crime in Chicago? First of all, they want to end poverty. They want this to happen by 2030 and end hunger. They want to rule the world in the matter of health. Remember, the farther away it gets from you, the less important you are. Remember when in your neighborhood they insisted on vaccinating children before they could go to school? And do you know that some children, they wanted to make them take certain drugs or not let them go to school, and it turns out that some of those drugs were not good for them? What makes the difference? Is it right now the parents decide what's good for the kids? In the New World Order, the New World Order decides what's good for your kids. When I was teaching school, there were teachers and there were parents that were on committees to read the new textbooks before the district bought them. But in the future, they will tell you what your child will be taught. You will not tell them. Let me get off this subject for a minute. If you wanted to get rid of the greatest nation there was, how would you go about it? How would you take the greatest nation in the world and ruin it? Well, you could give away its money. Not too many families survive with no money. Not many companies survive without money. Think. Could a great nation cease to survive because somebody gave away too much of their money? Is there a way that your kids could eat less than what they're eating now? Yeah. If you bring all the kids in the neighborhood into your house at mealtime, your kids are going to eat less than they're eating now. So wouldn't it stand to reason if you brought in a whole lot of people from other countries, that the people that are in the country are going to have less to eat? And anything that costs money, if you're sharing it among more people, then everybody winds up with less. That's why Judge Judy tells everybody, if you can't afford 5, 6, 7, 8 kids, don't have them. They would be in charge of the health and the education. Something happened last night, 7 o'clock. You're not going to believe this. Number 5 is gender equality. They want women to feel important. 7 o'clock, I was at this computer, and it popped up 21 hours ago. The United Nations took in an honorary ambassador for the United Nations. There is, in order to make women in the world, I'm having a hard time not laughing, in order to make women in the world feel wonderful about being a woman, they have made somebody honorary ambassador, so women will feel wonderful. At 7 o'clock, it came up on my computer. I clicked on it because I was by that time interested in what I'm talking about tonight. So when it said United Nations, I said, whoa, let's check and see who this is. You know who the honorary ambassador to make women feel good about themselves is? Did anybody see it by any chance? Am I the only one? It might have well been Minnie Mouse, because it's Wonder Woman is the new, in order to get number 5, gender equality, and make women feel wonderful about. Aren't you happy that we've got somebody to represent us now in the United Nations? And then water. We already know that water is going to be a problem during that 7 years because of some of the plagues and things that go on. Energy. Infrastructure, roads, transportation. If I want to go somewhere now, I get in my car and I go. But we don't have a department right now that's in charge of how I get from one place to the other. Imagine if I had a transportation problem, I can't go here on the mountain and get my problem solved. I can't go to Canada. I can't go to California and Sacramento. I can't go to Washington, D.C. I got to go to the world headquarters. You think they know who Preacher with Parrots is? Energy, economic growth. They insist on raising the price we pay people to flip hamburgers. Don't they know that day after tomorrow, a hamburger is going to cost more? Why? Because we've got to pay more to the people who flip them. I don't have degrees in that area, but I've got that figured out. Roads, equality. safe cities. If we can't make our own city where we know the people, we know the police, we know everything about the area and everything about those people, and we can't make it safe, some person representing us in the world government is going to come and make it safe for us. Cities. How much you can consume. Mineral rights. I could say so much on any one of these that I'm afraid to get started. Peace and justice. We already disagree on certain things. For example, I was listening a little bit ago on a video to somebody representing the world. I don't have prepared to read. I wish I did. I wish I had emailed it to my cell phone. I will have to put it at the bottom of the video, what I sent to you guys in an email. One of them says, we've tried committees and it doesn't work. Give us one person in the world, and be he God or a devil, we want him to rule the world. That was one of the quotes. If you have one of these, or I'll try to put it in the video, since I didn't realize till right now I didn't have a way of reading it to you. I'm using 2 computers right now. Sometimes I use 3. So I don't have a way to read it to you, and at the time I didn't have a printer. I'm just getting one working now, but at the moment I can't print anything out since I can't read it to you. But it's very good, and every quote on it is from somebody that is a member already of the United Nations. What one person considers justice, a kid steals, so you cut off their hand. That's what some people consider justice. Who's to decide? Global partnership. There's 17. Religion is a joke. Pope Francis spoke last year, just about a year ago, to a meeting of the UN. And he later had something that's on YouTube. It was originally done, I believe, on a cell phone. He starts out by saying, "Pardon me for speaking in Italian," but of course it's translated. And since it's a Latin-based language, I understand most of it anyway. When he gave his first Christmas Eve speech, and I heard it, I picked up a mistake that the translator made. Translator translated a certain word into universe, and the translation was world, and there's a difference between the universe and the world. So there are a lot of languages that are based on the Latin, so a lot of us have some understanding of it. But in that, he says, we're all children of God. I need a translation for children of God. Is he saying we're all born again, saved, and going to heaven? Or is he saying we all have the same creator? And he shows a Catholic, a Protestant, and a Buddhist all coming together, and a Muslim, all coming together, all saying they love God without saying who is the God they love. And we're going to put that is the concept going into the New World Order. And then a month ago, maybe a month and a half now, they had this meeting in Jerusalem. Already made a video about that, and I think it's time for me to close this one. Anything else that I need to say? Let me check and see if there's let me mention something else. At the beginning of the Second World Order, on this image of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Persia, Cyrus II, it had been prophesied. This is powerful. It had been prophesied that in 490 years, Messiah would come. The 490 years would start when Cyrus II signed the order that the Jews could return to Israel, and he would even assist them in going back and in rebuilding the temple and the city and the roads and the wall. We knew that after 483 years, Messiah would be presented to Israel as their leader. Let me repeat those dates. From the signing, it would be 490 years before Messiah would rule. But we knew that after 483 years, Jesus would be presented to his people as king, as leader. That 483-day period was fulfilled on what we call Palm Sunday. Now, walking in on a donkey, or coming in on a donkey, is no more high class than being laid in a manger when you're born. But that was not Jesus' purpose. The prophecy also said that after that would happen in 483 years, Messiah would be cut off. Cut off means killed. So the 483 years is fulfilled on Palm Sunday, and you know that Good Friday comes right after that. They waited another 7 years and nothing happened. Nobody thought, okay, it's been 490 years. Jesus isn't king yet. What's happening? What's going on? Until they realized that it stopped, the clock stopped after the 483 years, meaning we got what? 7 years unaccounted for. But we got other prophecies telling us that the Antichrist will rule the world for 7 years. Half of that is called the tribulation. The last half is called the Great Tribulation, because it'll be worse. So we've got a couple of things superimposed. We've got some past world leaders. And we went through a period of time. It's been 1,373 years. We haven't had a world leader. But we will not long after the rapture. It won't happen immediately, but it will quickly after that. Okay, I'm going to close now. What I said I would put in the video, I will type it in later. Until the next video, God bless.